Welcome everyone to Cavalier Insider Virginia opening. The men's basketball team opening their season on Sunday versus South Carolina State at John Paul Jones Arena. Hootie. I'm joined by Jerry Ratcliffe, by the way. That's Hootie. We were talking in our earlier segment that nobody saw because the camera didn't work correctly about the fact of the expectations for this year's team and whether or not this year is NCAA or bust. Your thoughts?
I think it is NCAA or bust, and before we get started, I'll explain my T-shirt. I'm going to make it a weekly tradition this season on our podcast. It's a leftover from the 1984 Final Four year to Virginia went to the Kingdome in Seattle and lost to Houston, Phi Slamma Jamma in overtime in the semifinals. But I think this year Virginia is going back to the NCAAs. I think, as we mentioned earlier in the one that didn't work, I think that the best thing that happened to this program, even though it was unfortunate for Mike Scott last year, was that he had the injury, because now he's back for a fifth year. Sammy Zaklinski's back for a fifth year. They're a veteran basketball team in a lot of ways, and I think that's going to pay huge dividends, particularly when they start ACC play. I think this is going to start a string of NCAA runs that will be something akin to what Terry Holland and Jeff Jones used to do when Virginia was one of the premier programs in the ACC, and I think they're beginning to get back to that level.
You know, Hoots, you brought up the T-shirts, and let me tell you my two biggest T-shirt regrets in my sports writing career. T-shirt regret number one, when we went to Puerto Rico, and Virginia played the University of Puerto Rico Mayaguez. The Tarzans was their nickname.
Yes.
I looked everywhere for a Puerto Rico Mayaguez T-shirt. They were nowhere to be found. I even got home, got online, couldn't find them anywhere online. What I would have done for a Puerto Rico Mayaguez T-shirt, I was going to wear it to a Dave Lato press conference. It would have been awesome.
That would have been a prize, for sure.
Second T-shirt regret, the CBI, which Virginia competed in a few years ago. We were at John Paul Jones Arena. We were all excited to go to the vendors who were going to be selling these. It was the first CBI ever. Surely you would think they would have sold CBI T-shirts. No CBI T-shirts to be found.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to remember that game, though, or that tournament.
I'm sure.
And the first one should have been the last one, actually. But.
Well, I've digressed a lot on the T-shirt tangent. But back to this year's team, Hoots, Mike Scott and Sammy Zaklinski, the two fifth-year seniors. This is probably the reason why a lot of people are expecting them to make noise this year. A big reason why they were predicted to finish fourth at ACC Media Day. Having two guys at such key positions, power forward and point guard, two 23-year-olds. I mean, that's a big deal, having that kind of experience out on the court.
It really is. I mean, you look at the ACC this year, and outside of Duke and Carolina, there's a lot of teams that aren't going to have that kind of experience around, and particularly at key spots that those two guys play. So I think it makes a huge amount of difference to have two guys with that kind of experience in their background. When it gets down into the nitty-gritty of close games, you got to rely on guys like that with experience and leadership, and I think those guys are going to be the difference in a lot of close games.
And we got to touch on the sophomores this year, Joe Harris and Akil and KT. What are you expecting out of these guys this year? Obviously, Joe was spectacular last year. I thought he was snubbed from that All-ACC team, and I'm expecting big things from KT and Akil this year, who I think, they showed to me enough last year to make me think that this year they can take that next step in their games and, be real consistent contributors, because they contributed a little last year, but it wasn't really consistent.
I agree. Joe Harris was one of the prolific young three-point shooters in recent league history, and I think he's going to just get better and better as they go along. He should have been on the All-ACC freshman team last year, I think. And as far as Akil and KT, as you know, those were two of my guys when we divided the six shooters and went on the trips to visit their homes. And I sat in the living rooms with their parents and their coaches and the two kids. And I know that as good as KT contributed as a freshman last year, he had to be disappointed because he had higher expectations of himself. And he's the kind of kid that's going to work really hard to live up to those expectations. So I think he will be better this year and contribute greatly to this team. And Akil is, we talked about it earlier, he's a kid that he's been told all of his life that he wasn't good enough to do this, or his limitations were here or there. And, he's always found a way to overcome that. And he did the same last year. Nobody expected him to have anywhere near the year he had. In fact, I think some of the NBA, some of the guys at the NBA Top 100 camps who were recruiting analysts, I think they felt that year before he came in that if any of the 6 shooters were to leave before the end of the year or at the end of the year, that it was going to be a kill. But he showed people that he could play defense and he was athletic and that he could contribute. And, he's just another case of him overcoming the odds. I think he's just going to get better, too, and help this team do good things this year.
Well, what I love about Akil, and I know Tony has to love this about Akil, is the fact the guy can guard at least 3, maybe even 4 positions out on the court. I mean, what an advantage for Akil to come off the bench. Someone gets in foul trouble, he can literally come in at any spot and guard, he could guard a post player, he could guard a wing player. Akil told me earlier in the preseason he thinks he could even, guard some point guards if need be. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I mean, that's some amazing defensive versatility for a guy like Tony to have at his disposal. And Tony, obviously, it's all about the defense, it's all about the pack line. What was your assessment of the team's defense last year? Because that's obviously going to be another one of the big things this year is how well they can do the pack line.
I thought it was better than the first year. I think some of them got it. I think some of the freshmen had a hard time adjusting to it. Akil may be the exception. But I think now that they're in the third year, most of these guys, it's ingrained into the way they play basketball. And I think they're going to be greatly improved on defense this year. I know Tony, it wasn't what he always wanted last year. They showed it in flashes and then would revert back to not being so solid. But I think that may be one of the strengths this year, really.
Well, in closing, Hoots, we mentioned that game against South Carolina State on Sunday. I know you have a very in-depth scouting report on South Carolina State, having those connections there. What are you expecting out of South Carolina State?
I think this is just another victim that most major Division I teams open up the season with, and unfortunately, I think there might be a few too many of those on Virginia's schedule this year, which I know has been criticized a little bit about them wanting to get back in the NCAA. There might be some question of some RPI strength of schedule. I think it'll be okay as long as they do well in the ACC and win some of those major battles against like Michigan, LSU, Oregon. But I don't know that much about South Carolina State.
That's not what you told me off air.
Except that I think Virginia should probably win by 15 or 20, which means they'll probably go down to the wire, right?
Like a Puerto Rico Mayagüez, if you will.
That's true. The Tarzans.
The Tarzans. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week, and we'll talk about the first couple games of the year.